Welcome back to GlobeTrotting. The channel is so close to 50,000 subscribers, be sure to hit that button if you haven't already. Airline mergers are fascinating, not necessarily solely for the prospect of companies coming together for the greater good, but I'm really talking about the reasons behind such a decision being reached. Across the last several decades, many mergers have either gone ahead or ultimately failed. There's one to me that stands out as what could have been, and that is the Emirates and Etihad merger. This is one that never eventuated, but in times did actually have some significant legs behind it. But before understanding why this didn't eventuate, as that's where I want to focus on, why do airlines feel the need to merge in the first place? Well, airlines from either the same region or potentially we're looking further away may look to consolidate for several big reasons. Maybe with a view of seeing greater benefits in the long term. That is really the overarching reason. But in some instances, combining airlines might look to do so to save one of those companies from imminent collapse. Maybe at a worse, both. Or maybe there is a more established airline that wants to save a company and sees that their assets are vital for their own prospective business. There could be a merger to expand a route network in an increasingly competitive market, with the thinking of that the two airlines coming together will offer customers greater connectivity. On top of that, mergers can just generally improve financial stability by combining assets and reducing debt, which in most recent years and following the global pandemic has definitely been a key reason why we've seen so much consolidation. By consolidating, the view is that these airlines come together as one and can manage various areas of their business better. Ultimately, in the long term, and like I touched on, the hope would be to see profitability and just generally stability, which is something maybe these airlines had been struggling with initially. As for Emirates and Etihad Airways, talk of their merger came following reputable reporting from Bloomberg, which identified several sources in the know that a prospective deal was being discussed. Ultimately, these discussions occurred in the latter stages of the 2010s, specifically in 2018, and this timeframe is essential for one reason and one reason only. In this year, the state of Etihad Airways was far from ideal. The airline was up against it in almost every single sense and had made massive cuts to its business to ensure the prospective long-term survival, with losses amounting in the billions every financial year. If it weren't for state support, there probably would not have been an Etihad Airways anymore, but one way that it could have avoided that end result would be Emirates stepping in and taking a hold of the company, using its assets to turn around the airline, emerging as one to really grab a hold of that UAE market. Just as a merger can be overwhelming, so can the complexities of life. We've grown up together here on YouTube, and I'm certain that regardless of your age, we've all experienced moments of being overwhelmed and unsure how to move forward. Life is complicated, much like the aircraft merger that I speak of, and I struggle personally, I know, with feeling like what I do isn't good enough, and I have many associated worries, just like most people. And at times, that's over-consuming. I'll be the first to admit that. But you're not alone. Not only do I want you to lean on this community where possible and use it as an escape to make friends, planespot, and engage in the passion and hobby, but there's also the option of therapy if everything becomes too much. BetterHelp is today's sponsor, and for a long time, they've been making connecting with a therapist not as daunting as it may seem. This is done thanks to phone calls, video chats, or messages online, where you're paired with a licensed therapist from the comfort of your own home. No, you don't need to go out and see your local GP. You don't need to head out to a clinic 2 hours drive away. You can do it from the comfort and safety of your bedroom. With a network of over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp offers a wide range of options. So if you don't feel that connection with your first therapist that you're maybe paired with, you can easily switch to another without any additional costs. So if you are struggling or feeling overwhelmed, or maybe you need to talk to someone, I do encourage you to try BetterHelp. It's an important thing, mental health, and it shouldn't be ignored. You can go to betterhelp.com/DJs Aviation or select my brand, DJs Aviation, when you sign up for a special discount on your first month. As Emirates charted a course for growth, their position in the industry was very different to Etihad, and therefore it was believed the pair could come together for the greater good. The rebuilding of Etihad Airways is another important reason why the merger never went ahead, despite discussions around the two coming together and the situation in which the Abu Dhabi-based carrier found itself in. It didn't ever really give up hopes of turning around its fortunes. Yes, routes were cut, employees were removed, and there were some pretty other hefty downsizing decisions that needed to be made to cut costs, but Etihad stayed the course and has emerged as a leaner and more sustainable airline, which analysts argued wasn't the case in the 2010s. When discussing the prospective merger, Emirates executives actually highlighted the Etihad rebuild. This was a company that moved from an airline looking at no future to now being stable on its own, essentially being able to run for the long term without needing Emirates or any other company for that matter to step in, which was a huge factor and another defining reason as to why Emirates decided to not persist with a tie-up. It wouldn't be worth the airline's while. However, there are other things to consider, which is why the merger would have been perceived as maybe a poor decision for Emirates. In some cases, airlines will come together to offer something very similar to their customers, or enhance that. Maybe an airline will see the assets of another, say its network, fleet, or employee base, as a great addition. But in the case of Emirates and Etihad Airways, they're not all that different in terms of the aircraft they operate, their key route market, and overall the business model. So similarities are occurring at every angle you look at. It's not as if Etihad Airways was, say, a low-cost unit looking at merging with Emirates, and then Emirates was looking to establish their own low-cost unit, or maybe Etihad Airways only flew to Africa when that happened to be a market Emirates was interested in and believed taking on Etihad would allow them to accelerate their growth there. There were similarities even to the point of trying to offer the best in-flight experience. And at their very core, both airlines wanted to use their geographical positioning to their advantage and be an economic driver by bringing more people to Dubai and Abu Dhabi respectively than them just acting as transit passengers. In this case, the pair are similar, and the whole deal could be perceived as very risky, because away from assets such as fleet and taking away a competitor, what did Etihad offer Emirates that was different, and was it really worth the airline's while of adding all these assets to just, say, boost their market share in specific regions? I'd love to hear your take on that proposition down below in the comments before I do move on. Something else that is very much worth exploring is, considering that Emirates and Etihad did express interest in merging but didn't proceed, there are other ways to collaborate in our aviation industry and therefore extend a relationship without necessarily needing, say, the airlines to come together formally and take each other over and basically see Etihad absorbed. The signing of an interline partnership in May of 2023 was not the first, but really highlighted the view of expanding an agreement and giving customers additional options for their itinerary when visiting the UAE. Basically, these two airlines wanted to capitalize on the market by enabling visitors to visit more locations on a single ticket, which obviously increases the ease of travel. This is just one of the many ways airlines can come together in this industry without a formal takeover. And considering Emirates' comments that Etihad is a lot more stable, well, it's a much more inviting proposition now than, say, 6 years ago when the airline was cutting routes, its future was unknown, and so much more. Say, even if a merger had progressed, it would have been ultimately also subject to thorough scrutiny from global regulators, who would have looked to see the overall impact on passengers and whether the merging of the two airlines would have resulted in an increase on airfares, and therefore an inability for, say, airlines to really compete in the market, whether that is your Qatar Airways, maybe even going as far as British Airways attempting to enter the Abu Dhabi and Dubai network. If it is deemed that there were to be significant ramifications, then regulators would have looked to either push to block the deal or potentially see these companies alternate how they were going about their merger so as they can finally get it approved. Really, this regulator pushback that I speak so much on is why so many mergers that we have seen in the past have been rejected. or heavily altered to ensure the impact on consumers is not as negative. Look no further than the Asiana and Korean Airlines merger, which is so close to getting approved, and maybe by the time this video goes live it will be, but they're awaiting that firm approval from the United States, which is the last regulator. As for Emirates and Etihad Airways, it is a true story of what could have been, but many would argue it ended up being the right decision by Emirates to not proceed with Etihad. And now Etihad, as a lone airline, is in a fantastic position and charting its own course for growth while still having a good and healthy relationship with Emirates. That's going to conclude today's analysis. If you have any thoughts, you're more than welcome to drop them down below in the comments. Thank you very much for your support here on the channel. It is greatly appreciated. I'll see you in a couple of days. Take care and do be safe.